Shaykh, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Walaikum salam.
How's everything going?
Alhamdulillah, doing well this morning or this afternoon.
Glad to have you on. Inshallah, I've been told by many people, including some past guests, that this is going to be a good story. They said I had to reach out to you to see if we can get something going, so we're glad to have you on.
I'm glad to be here.
Alhamdulillah.
Share my story.
We know that you are a revert to Islam. Tell us about your upbringing, kind of what your perception was of Islam, what the family dynamic was.
Sure. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My name is Trent Lyght, and actually I'm an Army brat. I was born in Augusta, Georgia, Fort Gordon. Spent my early childhood kind of traveling around the world. We lived in Germany, Stuttgart, and Mainz, where Dad was stationed. Lived in Staten Island for a time. Then went out to the South Pacific. Lived out in the Marshall Islands on the Kwajalein Missile Range. Lived in Hawaii for a year, and then kind of settled in Alexandria, Virginia, right? And that's where I kind of had my formative years. Growing up, my mother was Catholic, my father was Methodist. My father had a very religious background. His father was a Methodist minister. They're from Cambridge, Maryland, or Princess Anne, really, on the shore of Maryland. And growing up, we never really went to church. Religion wasn't really a big part of my life at all. I think it's because my mother was Catholic and my father was Methodist. So never had any. Never went to church a few times, but not much. So didn't really have a religious background, and that's kind of sets a tone for kind of how I grew up. I kind of grew up more of not an atheist, but more of an agnostic. I knew there was something that was controlling everything, but I really kind of pinpointed, and really just had no experience with formalized religion at all until I was in college. So in college, I went to Arizona State University on a swimming scholarship. Maybe I'll back up and tell you how I got to that point. So living in the Marshall Islands, it was an island, Kwajalein was an island that was 3 miles long and a mile wide. I learned how to swim when I was in Staten Island, but there all kids had to learn how to swim because we were surrounded by water. So swam competitively, and then when we were in Hawaii, we had a pool in the apartment complex, so I swam there. And then when I moved to Alexandria, we lived in a neighborhood that had a community pool, and they had a kind of a formalized swimming program called the NVSL, Northern Virginia Swimming League, where I swam and got pretty good at swimming. Basketball was my first love. Loved basketball, football, but I had to stop playing those because when I went to the University of Maryland basketball camp at 13, I started sprouting, right, having growth spurts, and I'm 6'7", so I started having these spurts, at 13, and I got Osgood-Schlatters disease pretty bad, just kind of calcifies on your knee, and so I turned to swimming and was kind of focused on that. When I was 12 years old, I made the All-Star team for Northern Virginia Swimming League. There was a coach there at the Alexandria YMCA who said, "Hey, do you want to come swim at the Y?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So there was a bunch of us, who in that group who liked swimming, were pretty good at it. So we swam. I swam with them for a couple of years. Moved to another team called MDW, the Military District of Washington, which is really all these military kids that were swimming. So we would swim at Walter Reed Hospital on the weekends, which was tough because it was more of a health, kind of a recovery pool, so the temperature was really warm, like 75 degrees, we're trying to swim. It's a 40-yard pool. We also had Arlington Hall, which was like a real small pool, 20 yards. So we went from 20 yards to 40 yards, anyways. But I got pretty good at swimming. Ended up becoming an All-American in high school, won the state championship in breaststroke. I was a breaststroker, but got a scholarship to Arizona State University as a swimming scholarship. So, being an African American, swimming, there was very few of us who were swimming, especially at that national level. Another guy from D.C. Who also, got a swimming scholarship. So, kind of the two of us at all the NCAA championships, right? A couple came later, but we were kind of the two. And I joined a fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and there were a couple of guys that were exploring Islam. And talked to me about it, and I was like, religion, Muslim, Islam, what is that? Didn't have any idea. They reverted early on. I guess they reverted back in like the 1980s. but it really had an impact on me. Well, I just kind of like, okay, that's great, good luck, kind of thing. Never had much. They were much older than me, so I never had much interaction with them. And ended up, just didn't really go to church that much, at all. Got married in a church, my first marriage. I got married in a church at 25, and but still didn't really go to that church that much, if I got married. So, got a job with Motorola, my first job out of college. I was a programmer for them, and then moved into marketing and sales, moved to Dayton, Ohio. And I guess was it 87, 88-ish? Yeah. Was the Midwest Regional Marketing Manager for Motorola. Dayton, Ohio is known for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. It's a big military base where they do logistics and development of all the Air Force avionics equipment, electronic warfare. Liked that job. Did well in that job. But again, didn't attend church at all, that much. Again, I was more just, kind of agnostic, just kind of going through life without any, concern about religion, God, anything. Kind of fast forward, I moved to New Jersey. Had an opportunity to go to New Jersey. And again, there, I went to church a little bit because my uncle, my father's brother, was a bishop. So I'll give background on my father's side. So my father's father, my grandfather, was a Methodist minister for the really South Jersey, Delaware, Maryland area. My uncle, he became a minister as well, got his master's degree, and actually his PhD in, and I'm not sure what his specialty was, but he became a bishop in the Methodist Church in the conference that they had. He was a bishop for about 10 years. He was in New York for a while, New Jersey, West Virginia, and he retired. And again, my father and all my family never really kind of, just kind of pushed religion. He should go to church. It was really, hey, do your own thing kind of thing. So, while I was in New Jersey, I, came into some rough times personally, right? I had some personal challenges with alcohol and other substances. Being a marketing manager in Dayton, Ohio, my job was to go out and, play golf and drink with the captains and majors, the guys who were making decisions, didn't really become a problem until I reached New Jersey, right? So ended up going to my first treatment center in Betty Ford in the summer of 1990. Stayed sober for about 6 months, ended up having another relapse, ended up going back into treatment, in December of 1990, and was there for 3 months versus the month at Betty Ford. So, there was a 3-month, 30-day program. The folks probably got a little bit more. So I did 3 months in a recovery center in New Jersey, Central Jersey, and stayed sober for 8 months, and then, had another relapse, right? Just things were going on. I was getting divorced, and I was, spending a lot of time in New York City. I was young, making good money, going to, Manhattan every other weekend, and getting there, leaving the house at midnight, driving an hour to get there, coming home at 8, 9 in the morning, kind of thing. And just was having a good time, But again, that good time turned into bad times because of the challenge that I had. After that last relapse, I moved to Georgia to get sober. That's how I got to Atlanta. My father found a recovery center here, and I had lost the job that I had. Lost a wife, lost pretty much everything except my car, my stereo, and some clothes. Through that divorce, and came down to Georgia, kind of regroup and start over. And that was in my sobriety date is February 26th. 1992, yeah. Resolved to, kind of figure things out. So, kind of backtracking, when I was in New Jersey at that recovery, I did go to church, every Sunday. They encouraged us to go to church. So there's a church that a bunch of us went to. We walked to church, came back, and, just nothing really kind of connected me. I went there. I liked the experience. I like going to church. In AA, they talk about the higher power of the God of your understanding, higher power. So knowing that something is greater than you, is kind of in charge of things, and that's really, it's more of a spiritual. I became more spiritual at that point in my life, and ended up kind of embracing when it came to Atlanta. So I ended up joining a church here in Atlanta. And was going to church every Sunday, and just staying out of trouble, following the instructions, of the counselors that I had. I had a really good counselor. There was an experience that kind of really put things in perspective in '92. There was a thing called a big party called what is it called? I can't think of the name of the event. It's an event here where in April, people just kind of come out, college students come, to Atlanta and just kind of have a party, right? It'll come to me. In any event, there were 10 of us in our study group, right? And she said, "Don't go down to this party, don't hang out, whatever." And I was like, "No, I'm not going to do it." So I ended up watching, NASCAR with another guy who wasn't going down there, and so. And of course, the NBA championship. And so Freaknik, that's what it's called, Freaknik, right? So they don't have it anymore here, but it was a big thing. And it was like, Freaknik, man, that's my thing. I need to be down there, right? Having a good time, but, I knew that I couldn't go. So I guess my point is we were 10 of us in the class in that program, or that class, we had our group on a Friday. On Monday, there was only 8 of us. And I never forget when the counselor came in and we're sitting around like, "Well, where's the 2 people who are there?" And she came and said they OD'd that weekend, right? And that had an impact on me. It's like, okay, this is serious. 'Cause I never had known anybody who had died from, ODing from whatever, right? And so anyways, that had an impact on me. But I was going to church pretty regularly. I moved from, and I was in Chamblee, the center where I was living, in an apartment complex and going to treatment there. Moved to Atlanta, moved to Buckhead, got a job, in the IT space. I was working for a small company called ISPA, and they were selling basically a document imaging solution, really the Adobe solution, but it was the Adobe before Adobe, right? So worked there for 4 years, moved to the insurance space, worked for Travelers for 3 years, and then worked for another IT company that was really one of the first SaaS platforms back in 2000. And they were basically aggregating insurance data into a single platform, so the risk manager could, instead of going to 3 different systems, look at his loss information to kind of figure out what's going on, they would integrate everything so they have a kind of an enterprise view of it. It was kind of revolutionary, right? Was there for 3 years, and then got a chance to go work for a company called ESIS, a risk management services firm, which was part of Chubb Insurance, and spent my career there in business development for 17 years. So again, I got remarried when I came down to Atlanta, and again, just never really went to church. Although there was a Methodist church that was right down the street where I lived, when I bought my house down in Atlanta, but never was compelled. I went there once, but I had a couple of events that kind of really pivoted me towards getting more than I was getting in AA. So, I credit AA for, bringing me to understand the God of understanding, a higher power. And I was reading books, meditation books, a lot of meditation books and the like. But after about 10, 12 years, I needed more. I needed something more to kind of fulfill my inner need for whatever. I didn't know what it was. And so I ended up going to, my mother passed away. My mother was living with me for a couple of years. She passed away in 2013 on Valentine's Day. I got divorced that same year. So I had a lot of turmoil going on, so I needed to get some kind of stability, and so I started going to churches, different churches. I know I needed something more than AA, and so I thought formalized religion would help me, get to where I wanted to be. So I ended up going to, Methodist churches, Baptist churches, Kojic churches, non-denominational churches, all, in Atlanta. I spent about 6 months, going to different churches, right? Just kind of, and trying to connect with people. And one of the challenges I had in my search for a church home, as I call it, was I was having a hard time connecting with people who were in that church, right, or in that formalized organization, religious organization. Nothing was really syncing up, I mean, I liked the message, but I, for some reason, not connecting with the people, even trying to connect, kind of staying around after church, and interacting with people, going to Bible study. Nothing was really connecting. In fact, with my mother, when she passed, I had a hard time to deal with her death, right? So I ended up going to Creflo Dollar's church down in the South because they had a grief and recovery program, right? So I went there. It was like a 12-week program, and that really helped me just kind of deal with the grief that I had, going on through her, because I kind of pushed it in, and it kind of came out, It's like, oh, got to deal with this thing, So being in recovery, when you have issues that come up, you kind of, you find what program that can kind of help you get through that. And I went down there, and it was a great program, good program. They really didn't push religion on you too much, but again, it was a mega church, Creflo Dollar, very known, pastor. I think he's got 4 or 5 churches, in the U.S., others around the world. And I had experience with them. I never I was leaving that conference, and the minister, the senior pastor, came out, and he wanted to, he said, you need to, take your Lord, take Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, like we can do it right now, right? I was like, do what right now? Like, convert right now. Like, give yourself to God right now. Jesus Christ, your Lord and Savior. Like, let me think about it. Let me think about it. It kind of came on kind of hard, and I kind of chuckled as I left because I just wasn't there. So, anyways, after all these churches going to and going through grief and recovery, I actually went to a service at the church. I think it's called World Changers. Went to got invited to an Easter Sunday service. Good service, I liked it, but again, I just really couldn't connect with the people there, and I probably should have went more times, but I ended up, let me backtrack a little bit. So I had a friend, the first person I met in Atlanta who became my friend was a woman named Zarina Shakir. Zarina was a Muslim. I met her at Rich's getting some plates and knives and stuff like that, kind of get my apartment kind of set up. And we became friends. She would invite me to her house, with other friends. We had a little gathering for food or whatever. And she was the first one that I knew person was a Muslim, And she actually, I got her a job where I worked at, and she had a son that I got to know, Teladine. And so, that was kind of my first exposure to Islam. So when I reached back and I talked to her about Islam, and I ended up taking a class. Well, take a class over at the Atlanta Masjid. I said, okay, that's great. I'll go there, So went there, and every Sunday, for about a month, started reading the Quran every day, and that resonated with me, right? It took hold of me. I don't know why, don't know how, but, Allah knows best. And I ended up, after 30 days, knew that this was for me, right? That's kind of the moment, I was in their class talking about it, and I was like, I think I want to be a Muslim, But I had to do some more research, right? Because I really didn't know about the Muslims, and what it was like. So I ended up, ordering books from Amazon and reading just a number of books. And then she had a network of friends, male friends that I would talk to. I met with them over the phone or in person to understand, okay, why did you become Muslim? What is Islam been like for you? They would all give me their individual stories of how they got there, and I ended up, again, just reading a lot of books on it. Atlanta Masjid, the program there, the teacher who was teaching it had some personal issues, and so they kind of shipped me over to Masjid Mukminoon off of Hank Aaron Drive, and I met Pastor Imam Farquan. He kind of picked up the ball, and he would just sit there and answer questions, right? Me and another guy went there, and he would answer all the questions that I had. And then they had a program there, so I kind of picked up that program, learning about Islam, how to pray, what the prayer was, just the overall, essence of what Islam is at that. But Imam Farquan was instrumental, very instrumental in me, solidifying my decision to go there. So, kind of funny. I would go to I had a gym. I was working with a personal trainer that was not too far from that masjid. So I would go to the Fajr Salat to kind of find out these guys are real, right? I wasn't Muslim, but I'd go to the Fajr and do the Salat, and just kind of, go through. I did that probably about 2 months, and then on June 24th, on a Friday no less, I ended up taking my Shahada. Alhamdulillah. And so, that's where it all began, right? That's kind of how I got there, So, the first, I guess, year was kind of understanding, Islam. I had read a lot about it, but understanding the prayers and just understanding the whole concept of Islam. Reading about the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his journey, and just embracing it in each and every way, learning how to pray, learning salat, learning du'as, that kind of thing, praying every morning and doing the five prayers a day. I kind of kept it to myself for a while because I didn't want to tell my family, because I wasn't sure how they would react. And one day my dad, who lives in Savannah, was up and he was visiting his wife's family here. And we were at dinner and I told him I'd become Muslim. He said, Muslim? Muslim? You're Muslim? It's like, yeah, Dad, I'm Muslim. Okay. And he was kind of stunned there, right? And he only asked me one question. He goes, you got to change your name? I go, no, I'm changing my name, Dad. Okay. Because I really, again, I kind of kept to myself, my journey. Wasn't sure, but, when I became sure, I informed him first. I called my sister. She kind of had the same shocked, like, what? Muslim? You're a Muslim? Islam? And so now my grandfather, who really didn't go to any formal religion. I guess he would go to church from every time to time. He worked with Muslims. He had a real estate business in Harlem, so he was dealing with selling property to in New York City, in Harlem, around the country to Muslims. He was very familiar with it. So he's like, okay, glad you did it. I'm glad you did it. My uncle, the bishop, he had no problem with it, right? Okay, congratulations, So, different people had different, aspects of it. Most of my friends, kind of took a step back, some didn't really care. Okay, great, But, I had made the decision. It was a conscious decision, there was no backtracking. I knew once I was in, kind of thing. And that's kind of how I came to Islam. The story. It's unique in a lot of ways, but I do credit and I'm still in AA, right? You never once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. You never leave alcohol. I don't go to as many meetings as I used to, but I was doing meetings 7 days a week. Early on, became involved in my group, the Heavy Hitters here in Atlanta. And there were a few Muslims there, in the group. So I reached out to them, about their experience and how they became, all those were reverts as well. But, no pushback from anybody, so, okay, great, I'm happy for you, kind of thing. So, I had some friends, some good friends that were, kind of reserved about it, didn't, understand, why. And they would always say, well, you always come back, It's like, well, I think I'm over here. I'm good, kind of thing. So anyway, that's kind of my story, how I came to Islam. So, alhamdulillah, I'm, no going back. And the more I, read about Islam, read the Quran, there's obviously steps becoming, when you revert to kind of get to where you want to be, right? So those steps, are learning different surahs, learning different du'as, participating in Ramadan. My first Ramadan was very challenging just from the eating standpoint, right? I was just struggling with that. But the last Ramadan we had, which was my 9th Ramadan, I had the experience of, not eating so much, knowing the first week would be tough, but, not eating as much, stuff in my face in the mornings, before I break salat or make salat and then eating less. So, I've learned how to manage that. But the first week has always been kind of tough. But once you get back to the first week, you're good, and then you get really kind of focused, with the praying on time, going to tashahhud, making some taleems, that kind of thing. So it kind of has solidified me. So the more I'm into it, the more I've learned about Islam, the more I meet people, and their journeys to Islam, it's really kind of, cemented my belief system for sure. I guess the last thing I'll say, point that I wanted to make, which kind of escapes me right now. So, again, you kind of grow, you learn more and more. You're reading more of the Quran. You're reading, Surah Al-Kahf on Fridays, try not to miss that, reading Surah up in Saturdays or even in the mornings. I started to learn Arabic about a year and a half ago. Right? Somebody, I don't know how I found me on Instagram. They called me, and they said, hey, we got a class, a Canadian company. So I started about a year and a half ago. And I went through the Quran once. I'm going through it the second time. And, Arabic is no joke. Okay, I'll put it that way, just the way your mind has to kind of change a little bit, I learned French in high school, 4 years of French, so I figured, it wouldn't be too bad, but it's just a whole different language, and even the way, reading, right to left versus left to right was a challenge, but in the first 6 months was very difficult. I mean, I didn't want to do it, but I signed up for it, so I'm going to do it, right? I want to learn Arabic, so I want to read the Quran in Arabic, right? So I ended up, learning the letters, and then, 2 letters together, and 3 letters, and then a word, and then all the different, accents and sukoons and, and all that. And then now I got to the point, I think after about a year, I actually look forward to my classes. So I take a class, I do it 5 days a week, Monday through Thursday, and then one on Saturday. And I actually enjoy, experiencing it, reading it, It just, not that I think I'm more Muslim by doing it, but it just kind of connects me with the religion more, that I can actually read it, Now I'm still struggling with, saying it like you say it, and the accents and all that. But I do enjoy it, and we're on Surah 10 right now. So we're finishing that. Well, I'll probably start over again, right? Just kind of keep doing it till I can kind of get to the point where I can, read it real well and then start to speak it, kind of thing. So anyways, that's kind of where I'm at, in my Islamic journey.
When they said that you had a story, they weren't lying. They weren't lying.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is that you're brought up as a Christian, and then the first time you're at AA, you're trying to find some sort of spirituality, maybe something that can help, and that's what the counselors over there are encouraging. So automatically one would assume the first option is Christianity, which is what you did. The first thing you did was go to a church. What was it specifically that you didn't find in Christianity that you did find in Islam? Because you said you went to churches in Jersey, then you came down here, you went to a bunch of different churches, and then you said, at one point you had one down the street, but you just didn't feel it over there. But then the first time that you talked to your friend and you kind of got your feet wet with Islam and reading the Quran and going to Atlanta Masjid and the Mu'minun,
yeah,
it just seemed that something clicked, and then it clicked again, then it clicked again, when it never clicked for Christianity. So what was the difference, looking back, with your experiences with Christianity and exploring that versus Islam, and how it really helped you overcome the struggles that you were going through?
Simply put, it's the singleness of message, right? The singular message that Islam has. It hasn't changed for 1,400 years. That really resonates. Nothing's changed. The other religions, they all have their different take on, the Bible, right? And I never read I read parts of the Bible. I never, really read it through. But again, the messaging was just a little different. Every, denomination had their different take on it. And I was like, okay, so what's the real one? And Islam, hasn't changed. The message has been the same, and that's really kind of what cemented my belief that Islam is the true religion, right? So that's pretty much it. I mean, it hasn't changed. It's the same. It's over time. It hasn't changed, right? People all over the world, the growth of Islam has been tremendous too. All over the world. I have. I was fortunate to actually visit some Islamic countries. So my second wife was from Algeria, and she wasn't Muslim, but her father was named Muhammad, right? And so after the war, her and her family immigrated to France, and he kind of, how do I put it? He didn't embrace Christianity, but he didn't leave Islam either, right? But I never talked to him about it because at that time I wasn't really, Islam, okay, whatever. But I did go to some Islamic countries. So the first Islamic country I went to was Egypt. I went to Egypt at a time when, we were getting ready to bomb Afghanistan. In fact, when I landed in Cairo, I'm going downstairs to have breakfast. One of the gentlemen in the group said, "Have you heard the news?" I go, "No, what's the news?" We started bombing Afghanistan. I go, "Oh no." Because we knew it was coming, right? This was in March of 2022, I guess it was. Yeah, 2022. We knew it was coming, but we figured we'd kind of get in and get out. No, I'm there, right? So, but here's the thing, I said, well, here I am, and, so we did the tour of Cairo, went to Giza, and all that. But the conference that she had was in Alexandria. So we took a bus up there. When I got set, I called my dad, say, hey, I'm here at the hotel. He's like, when are you coming home? I go, what do you mean coming home? It's like, well, we're bombing Afghanistan. You need to get out of there, right? He's like, nah, I'm staying, whatever's going to be is going to be, right? And then my grandfather calls, son, come on home now. He's from Alabama. Son, come on home now. You ain't supposed to be over there. I said, Granddad, I'm staying, so, and that was the end of that. And so the experiences in Egypt, Tunisia, were two, seminal most for me, because when I did the tours in Alexandria, everybody treated me fine. There was because I'm an American, I wasn't, looked upon any differently. Everyone was very nice, very cordial. It's like there was nobody really cared about that, right? Although that night when I was watching TV, that first night, the hotel that I was at, which is the American Hotel next to the American Embassy, next to the American University, was surrounded by militants, whatever, right? Just protesting, like, oh, I got to go back there when I go back, because we had to go back to the hotel before we left the next day. I said, I'm not going to worry about it. On Friday, I was there, I think, Sunday through Saturday. So that Friday, we were supposed to go to the mosque, to visit, right? And the tour guide gets on. It's like, we're going to, do the Romo-Grecan tour today. We're not going to go to the mosque today because we don't want to have a, busload of Americans going there. It's like, that's a good idea, But again, in meeting, going to different museums, everybody was, treating me well. And then we went to the, Saturday we went to the mosque, and there was no problems there, right? What was interesting about that trip was the other Americans on the trip, they would always say they were, from England, right? It's like, wait a minute, I thought you were from Kansas, They would deny the fact they were Muslim, and it kind of bothered me, right? It's like, what are you talking about? It's like, you're from America, own up to it. But they didn't, right? Because the fear kind of came in. So I understood it, but I'm American, American. I don't agree what's going on, but it is what it is, right? So it was nice. And in Tunisia, I spent a couple weeks in Tunisia. Loved that country. Tunisia, I was in Tunis for a few days to kind of get, whenever I travel, I always stay in a hotel near the airport in the city, a couple of days, kind of get my body acclimated to the time frame. Was watching the World Cup there, and going to the bar there was like, okay, this is not what I'm going to go. They were just doing whatever, right? Drinking alcohol, celebrating, partying, whatever. And then I went to another town called a resort town called Hammamet. Beautiful town, right on the, Mediterranean Sea, very resort focused, seeing the Sofitel, beautiful hotel, no problems there. We went to Jerba, which is a little island off the coast of Tunisia. Her sister had a house there, so we flew there, spent a week there in Jerba. Again, no problems there. And as we toured, the coast of Tunisia, had no problems at all. So, but going back to my time in Egypt, it's kind of a funny story. When I heard the adhan come on, right? Oh, it's kind of cool, So I would get up and listen to it. Okay, great. Then it'll come in like, early afternoon. I was like, oh, there it is again, After about the third day, I was like, can you turn that off? I was like, turn it off, But it's like, it's not going to change. We were staying in I guess, a former palace, right? Of I guess, one of the presidents or whatever. And it was there. So that was kind of, something to get used to. But again, this is 2002. So again, I hadn't, really even began that journey yet, right? But the experiences of being in those Muslim countries at that time had a positive impact on me because nobody took, any offense. Nobody took, any of their anger about what the U.S. was doing, out on me because I was an American, right? So I remember that, right? It was like, hey, he's American, but, so what, right? So anyways, I'm not sure if that, I answered your question early on, but I kind of had to embellish it a little bit, about my experiences, And I never went to Algeria, where she was from, but those were the two countries that I went to. And of course in France, I was there quite a bit, but But yeah.
Subhanallah, is that you had your epiphany about Islam intellectually way later, right?
Right.
But Islam still had some sort of something in your heart or in the back of your mind. And it reminds me of there's so many stories of disbelievers who became Muslims when they saw the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not from him giving, logical points addressing every single one of their doubts or an intellectual argument that's waterproof that you just have to accept Islam. It's just by looking at his character.
Right.
It was just by interacting with him. And, you talk about, you read the Quran, you had discussions with other Muslims and other reverts, circa 2012, 2013, around that time. But already Islam had a positive, connotation in your mind or in your heart because of the interactions that you had back in '02 when you went to Egypt and the other countries.
Yeah, I guess it did. Something was, supplanted in the back of my mind, and seed was planted, I guess, that, in sprouting out, a number of years later. But, it's just, it's, we all go through, our life, we go through changes in life, we all grow, right, and at that point, again, those two incidents, the divorce and the death of my mother, had an impact on me where I had to find something, right? Because AA was, I had gotten all I can get out of AA, right? I was sober for, I don't know, 15 years at the time, and I just needed to find more, and Islam gave me that more, that I embraced and I embrace it today, my life, and the way I look at things are a lot different too, I'm being in sales, I may do it, to get the sale and I'm working on it, whatever, but at the end of the day, Allah gives, what He wants to whom He wants, right? And one of the things that, really resonates with Islam is, when you want something really bad, sometimes, you don't get it because Allah knows best, and there's potential harm that might, if you take this job, it might not be good for you, right? So I kind of just default to that, right? Things are going to happen how they happen, I just now I just have a different view of success, right? My success is not in the car that I drive, the house that I have. My success is, becoming the best Muslim I can be. I'm not always the best Muslim. I still, I still have my challenges in certain areas, but I've changed quite a bit in the way what I look at, things I read, things I look at, how I address certain, issues and challenges that come up from a business perspective or a personal perspective. I look at it from a different perspective, different lens, if you will, right? That this is the way it's supposed to be. And there's comfort in that, right? There's comfort in knowing that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I understand Islam, whoever was placed here on earth that was determined 10,000 years ago, and your life was already determined. So whatever's going to happen is going to happen, right? It's already been determined, what's going to happen, the qada of Allah, and so I embrace that and kind of go with it, right? Whatever's meant for me is meant for me. Whatever's not meant for me is not meant for me, and if it's not meant for me, there's protection in that, right? And there's comfort in knowing that.
You talked about Islam versus Christianity. The reason why Islam kind of just clicked right away was intellectually it made sense that over 1,400 years, it's one message,
right.
It's one consistent book. It's not like Christianity where, the Protestants have a different amount of books, the Catholics, the Ethiopian, they have a different amount of books. All these different denominations have kind of different views on Isa, on Jesus, peace be upon him, and different aspects of Christianity. So Islam is one thing, so that is an intellectual argument, right? But kind of on a spiritual level or on an emotional level, when you're going through hardships, you're going through struggles, what did Islam do for you at the time that Christianity couldn't?
Good question. I guess, this kind of ties into AA, but you're really accepting, right, that which is happening, right? When I became Muslim, I married a Muslim woman here from Atlanta. It lasted only 4 years. And, I wish it had lasted longer, but it didn't, And what was interesting is that when we were signing the divorce decree, I looked at the date, and we were supposed to sign this a week before. The date was November 18th. I got married on 4 years to the day, November 19th. I'm like, man, I got in the car like, wait a minute, 4 years to the day? he knew something, right? And so that's kind of one of these one-off things I kind of think about. 4 years, it's over, right? And best to her, best to me, we go on our way. But it makes sense. I mean, the Quran just makes sense. You read it. I mean, I've read it, several times, and I try to read it, 3 or 4 times a week, in addition to reciting it. But I'm sure that's your question. But it's grown on me. It's in my heart. Nothing's going to change my belief. I think this is best for me, right? May not be for anybody else, but for me, it's worked best for me, and I'm glad that I'm Muslim, and yeah, I'm just really happy, to I look forward to going to Jummah on Fridays, and look forward to Ramadan, kind of tepidly, but I do look forward to it because I know the benefits that come from going through Ramadan, and then also I mean, getting involved in some way, shape, or form. Masjid Mu'minun is kind of where I cut my teeth, so to speak, before I moved up here. I still go there from time to time. I still have a communication with Imam Farquan, again, who was a very important piece in my becoming Muslim. But I'm on the Health and Wellness Committee for Masjid Mu'minun, so we have these programs, taleems that we put together. So I'm on the committee. The committee was, we had it about 5 years ago, but then the imam who was leading that kind of passed away. They kind of resurrected it, so I'm on that. So, trying to do my part and trying to just bring the message, a message of health and wellness to the community, through Masjid Mu'minun. So yeah, it's it's in me. It's here to stay.
On that note, take me through the moment that you accepted Islam.
The moment, huh? Well, I knew I was going to do it on a Friday, I went to the Masjid Mu'minun and I made my prayer, and I told the imam that, I want to take my shahada right there. He was like, "You want to take your shahada?" Because he knew I wasn't Muslim, but everybody thought I was Muslim because I was coming there praying for months. I've been praying there for months. And it was pretty simple. I mean, it was short, it was brief. I liked that. There was a sense of relief that I had made the decision because it was kind of weighing on me, because my life was going to, go in a different direction, But it wasn't really emotional. I was kind of excited about it, happy about it, internally, but I didn't really share with a lot of people, I don't think I shared with anybody, until later, right? So. But it was, things change, right? How I eat, when I get up in the morning, the prayers I have to do, reading the Quran, and I was, again, reading a lot of books about it. There were a lot of books that were, written by, that were written by professors who were non-Muslim, but they wrote, I can't think of the name of that book, but there's one book that I read, I think it was the third book that I read, that just kind of brought it all together, And then there's another book that I read later when afterwards was that kind of solidified it. It's called Being Muslim. It's a white book. It's got a little red palm tree on it. I get the people who are interested in Islam. I say, hey, read this book. You want to know about Islam? Read this book, right? I get to my uncle. He wanted to know more about it. But yeah, there was nothing, really special about that day other than I took my shahada, right? I didn't really get emotional about it, because I knew I was going to do it. I guess it was a confirmation, right? Like, hey, I'm doing this. I'm confirmed. I'm ready. I'm doing it today, kind of thing. So, yeah, that's about it on that note.
I mean, the way you're saying is like, oh, that's it. But subhanAllah, it's the biggest decision, right, that you could have ever made. That
it took me a while to get to that point. It's that day. I mean, I'm not sure really what happened during that week before. I just knew that I was taking it soon, and I wanted to take it on Jummah, best day of the month, that Friday, that Friday morning. And it's kind of funny, one of the gentlemen who, who's there as well, he's a physician, he said, "I thought you were already Muslim. You've been coming and praying." It's like, yeah, I had to come check you guys out, man, make sure everything was like, right, so, but he got a laugh out of it, subhanAllah, so, and then my friend Zarina, when I told her, she just was just joyful and happy, just like she couldn't believe it, and then when she came to Atlanta, she came over, and actually she sent me this book. It's a Quran, but it's I guess maybe I won't say it's Quran for reverse, but it has a lot of the English translation, obviously, with the Arabic. But in each beginning of each chapter, it talks about the chapter, main points, themes of the chapter. So it's a good study guide to find, okay, I'm reading this chapter on, Surah, Yunus, right? And I'm reading that chapter, I get 10 Yunus. It tells you, what are the key salient points, what the message is, when it happened, so it's a good guide for me, and that book was, I read it, as much as I can. But it also, just, again, was kind of anchored my belief, with this book, that because it put things in the intellectual tone where I can kind of, know why this surah was here, why it was revealed, the time was revealed, here are the salient points, kind of thing. And the other thing about the Quran, which is it kind of, it talks about things over and over and over again, right? But in different stories, right? The message is kind of the same, but that message kind of just changes over and over from time to time, and you kind of get, just get a reminder of it. It's constant reminders about things. So, but she's no longer with us. But she was ecstatic when I took her. She couldn't believe it. It's like but she kind of knew. When I was asking, hey, give me these phone numbers. She kind of knew. We talked about it. Her journey. Being a revert. She came up through the Nation of Islam. Kind of thing. And that's the other thing about Islam, with the Nation of Islam. With W.D. Muhammad, Imam W.D. Muhammad, how he came over. Kind of learning about that. And his role in shaping, African Americans, and kind of getting them on what they call proper Islam, I use that term a lot, it's proper Islam, like Islam is Islam. No, it wasn't always like this, kind of thing, and talking to the generation who came over early, the guys who came over in the, I guess it was the late, early 70s, mid 70s, that, a lot of folks kind of came over, so. SubhanAllah, it's, I talked to a lot of those guys and, to get a lot of wisdom from them too. I asked them, like, what happened with you? Well, your mom, said this is what we're going to do. And we kind of went that way, kind of thing. And so, anyways.
If you wanted to, you could have just, taken your Shahada, you accept Islam, and then you're just a Muslim and, you kind of just do the bare minimum and get by. But you're talking about how, you're taking classes, you're trying to learn how to read the Quran, you're going through the Quran over and over and over again, which can be said is probably more than a lot of people who were born Muslims. Tell me what inside of you is pushing you to more or less be a student of knowledge, that I want to be a student of the Quran, I want to learn Arabic, I want to deepen my skills and my knowledge about the religion, when, you could just get by doing the bare minimum.
Yeah, I've never been a guy that's been a surface kind of guy, right? I'm always kind of, if I'm in, I'm all in kind of thing, whether there's alcohol, I'm all in, the partying, I'm all in, right? I've just never, took things, for granted, and just never, I've always tried to find purpose in the jobs that I've had. I've kind of thrown myself into things. I don't know, it's my nature. I'm not sure where that came from. Maybe it's from my athletics, being a swimmer and getting up, 5 o'clock in the morning, and then, when I was in high school, and then, swimming for 2 hours, going to school and then going back to the pool for 2 more hours. I did that for, 6 years, just the grind, but I like that, and I think that's, that deep dive into, into swimming, become the best I can, translate it into the deep dive into my jobs that I have, the deep dives that I have, and into Islam, and anything I kind of put my mind to, I'm all in, kind of thing. So it's just kind of, I think of it like that. There's more that I can learn. There's more that I can do. The holidays have been great. I don't go to as many as I should, but just understanding people's perspective on things. Understanding what's going on in the world. And just things that just little things. I think about it. I went to another Muslim country, Kazakhstan. Yeah. That was an interesting experience. There's a brother who has a group. He's from Atlanta, and he went over there to start a business. Right, and he made some good connections. So he was my other African Americans come over there, and I went over there to see if I could, kind of generate something, because I got divorced. I'm looking for a new challenge, and I went there in the fall, a little chilly, but I went to Nur Sultan for the most part. I did go to the former capital for a couple of days. But they have one of the largest mosques in the world that holds like 100,000 people, right? It's gigantic. I saw that when it was being built. It's near the airport. I never didn't chance to go to it, but just the way life was there, it was very peaceful, very calm. No, criminality. No, nothing. It was that was of course I was already Muslim at that time, but it was like, okay, this is kind of interesting. How they're just living their life. Of course, people were fascinated with me because I was tall and African American. They're kind of looking at me and staring at me. They wouldn't say a word, but they would stare at me, and I'm used to kind of that, But in any event, I guess it's just, again, being all in and everything, what is my job? I kind of just put my everything into it, because if you don't put anything in, you're not going to get much out of it, right? So, I got a lot to learn, but I'm going to continue on this journey, to learn Arabic, to hopefully be able to speak it fluently, to go back to some Arabic countries, Jordan. I was in Jordan too, right? That was, I went to Jordan. I forgot about Jordan. Jordan was an interesting experience that I went to. I went in the summer, hot as get it all be, and that was an interesting, experience too. I guess my takeaway from Jordan were two things, right? I went to the Dead Sea, by myself, and kind of sat there on the beach, and when, sat there, read a book, floating, kind of thing you see on people doing, it was kind of cool. But the family structure that I saw, so there's like a little street, and it's got a bunch of restaurants and cafes, and I went there several times. And what I took away from that was, you see three generations of families, right? You see the babies, you see the parents and grandparents all walking down the street together. The family dynamic of Islam is powerful, right? It's all about family, right? And I saw that everywhere I went, but it was most, prevalent that I really noticed it in Jordan, right? In Amman, so people were very nice there too. It's an incredible place. The malls there, were just unbelievable. I've never been to a mall like, with, I'm not sure the rails were laced with gold, but it looked like they were laced with gold. Just marble floors. It just was fun. You never expect this mall to be like that, and then, they got the different hallways for the people who got the big money to buy the jewelry, They got the guards there, It's like, what's going on there, So anyways, that was a good experience too. So again, that was probably in 2000, I think 2004, 2005, Again, another seed that was planted, about Islam. I didn't really hear the adhan that much, because I guess I was far away from the adhan, but it was being, I think I heard a couple times, but it was again, that family dynamic was key, and Islam is really all about family, but it is really family's important component of Islam, which I embrace.
To wind down the podcast, we're gonna have a quick fire round. Hit you with some questions, and we want your thoughts.
Okay.
So you said growing up, you are a very, very good and awarded, or what's the word, decorated swimmer, and you're a fan of many sports. What are your favorite NBA and NFL teams?
Well, the Commanders. I grew up right outside Washington, D.C., so I'm a Commanders fan, grew up with the Redskins, and the Lakers, basketball. Baseball, Orioles, right, because they were there, I was a Baltimore Bullets fan first, and then they moved to D.C., so grew up with the Baltimore Bullets, and then as I got older, I gravitated to the Lakers, but didn't really have a hockey team, but I was really on the hockey, so couldn't comment on the hockey team.
You're pretty much on two opposite ends of the spectrum. You have the greatest franchise in the Lakers, and then you have the Redskins / football team / Commanders on. Were they ever good?
They were. We won a couple of championships.
Dude, that was like way back when.
Again, in the 70s, Sonny Jurgensen and, and not Cal Ripken, but I think the other guy's name. We had, we won a championship against Denver, with against John Elway, that was a great,
This is in the 90s.
90s, yeah. This is 80s. Yeah, it was 88. Yeah, it was, happy days, Of course, we lost against the Raiders, and that was, disappointing, but, but I love sports, I love the competitiveness of sports, right?
Unfortunately, y'all have
we're coming back.
Not sniffed that success for the last 25 years.
Well, yeah, we're coming back though, right? We did pretty well last year, right? We got a good team, good squad. So hopefully, we still got to beat Philly, but hopefully that'll come around one day.
What is your favorite part about Islam?
My favorite part about Islam. Just knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge. The comfort in knowing that He's running the show, right? All this other stuff, the cacophony that's going on, yeah, it's going on, but at the end of the day, He's running the show. And worshiping Him brings me peace.
It's a hadith, or maybe just a saying, that if there's something destined for you, there's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for you. If every government in the world and they put all the money towards it and they got all the power and clout and social media and everything, and they tried to go against that qadr, they wouldn't be able to. And if something wasn't destined for you and all the money was put into a project, and the most powerful governments and superpowers in the world were trying to get it for you or go against the qadr, then they wouldn't be able to do it. So subhanAllah is a really powerful.
Yeah, and kind of on that note, I always look back at, why am I 6'7", African American, and I'm a swimmer? How did that, I should be playing basketball. I love basketball or football. But, I had other plans, right? Knees, like, hey, you can't do it, every year the high school football coach would come in the house, like, we want you to play football, come on and play football. Because I was a really good athlete. He saw that when, at the gym or whatever. I said, I'm not doing it, man. I just can't take the hit. I get one hit there, it's over, but I like swimming. By that time I was really into swimming. I knew I had, I just enjoyed, being in the pool. So why, this path, right? Not the path that people think I should take, right? I always have fun teaching people, like, so guess what sport, And I would tell them it's an Olympic sport, but there's no bat, ball, anything, right? And some people get it. I had one couple, I was working in a grocery store, and they came up to me and they said, we have this aura, we feel this aura, this aquatic water thing. What's going on, And I said, well, what do you think? He goes, you're something tied to the water. Are you a swimmer? Out of the blue. I never saw people again, right? But, it's kind of weird. But anyways, kind of never heard. But, yeah.
You said that you traveled to a bunch of different countries. Which one was your favorite and why?
Probably Tunisia. I just, the people there, it was just that 2-week experience just was a gorgeous. I love Tunis. It's kind of a mini Paris. The cafes. And watching people. Being on the Mediterranean Sea. Especially on this island, I was in the Mediterranean Sea. Just gorgeous. I just the food was good. People were nice. Growing up and being old enough to have seen the first version of first Star Trek movie or Star Wars movie, in the theater, right? Lining up with people, 100 other people trying to get and see this movie. I got to see where that was filmed, because the guys, here's what we filmed Star Wars out here somewhere, and kind of, they couldn't pinpoint it, but there was no stamp out there. Star Wars was filmed here, but it just was just a really good experience. I just really had a great time there. Everything was just really, really good. The hotels were nice, the beaches were nice, the food was good, smoked my first hookah over there, with a Greek mint tea, okay, this is kind of cool, I didn't know what hookah was, but the whole experience that, it was good, I bought a couple nice rugs there, so yeah.
You're kind of dating yourself with saying that you watched Star Wars for the first time.
I'm old, man. I'm old, but I can stand to tell a story,
This wasn't a planned question, but now since you mentioned Star Wars, what is your favorite movie?
That's an easy one, if I can remember the name of it. I should just pop up. Quentin Tarantino movie. Samuel Jackson. What's the name of that? I can't think of the name of it. I'm drawing a blank.
What's it about?
Golly. It'll come to me. It's about some gangsters, who are looking for this package. What's the name of the movie? God, I laughed through the whole movie. People were looking, why are you laughing? Because it was funny. God, I'm drawing a blank.
After having gone through the Quran and studying it with the different classes, what is your favorite surah or your favorite story that kind of just resonates with you?
I guess the story of Yusuf. That story is just unbelievable. The trials he went through and where he ended up. That's his story resonates probably the most. Yeah.
Very powerful surah indeed. So, what is your closing advice for anyone who's watching, anyone who wants to become a student of knowledge, anyone who wants to pursue studying Quran, such as yourself?
Yeah.
What is your advice for them?
If you're interested in Islam, I would say that I would recommend that book, Being Muslim. It is really comprehensive. It really, even though I read it when I was Muslim, I just kind of bought the book and it was recommended to me. It really, cemented my belief in Islam. If you're interested in it, learn more about the religion. I wouldn't say you have to necessarily read the Quran, but read books about Islam, like I did. A lot of different books, talk to a lot of different people. People who were born Muslim, people who weren't born Muslim. Who are reverts. Just do as much, information gathering to be able to make an informed decision, right? As best you can. But one of the things that I want to do, but I never do, as it really is I've done with a couple of friends to say, you really should read the Quran, and I got so much pushback, I stopped doing it, right? Just read it, I know you're a Christian, but just read the Quran, just read it, I'm not trying to convert you or, get you a Muslim, but, just read it because there's interesting stories in there, so, and then, talk to, imams, talk to other people, just talk to as many people as you can about their experiences, and, it'll either resonate with you or it won't, kind of thing, so, that's my advice. If you're interested in Islam, read about it, as much as you can. Watch videos on it. Some movies on it, and before you decide to make the plunge. But when you make the plunge, you'll be ready. Because you'll have done your homework, so to speak, right? You've done the studies, right? So, anyways. That's what I recommend. I'm still thinking, by the way, can you look at a movie?
Let's look it up right now.
One eternity later.
Pulp Fiction?
Pulp Fiction, there it is. My favorite movie of all time. I love that movie. Again, the stories in there, right? There's like 3 or 4 stories kind of going on with that movie, and yeah, it's the little violence there and some craziness going on there, but it was a funny movie. I'd laugh the whole time, and people were like, why are you laughing? It's like, because it's funny. Look, so anyways. Yeah, it's my favorite movie.
Shaykh Trent, Jazakallahu khairan for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah.
Of course, any time. The story was interesting, and we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep you steadfast upon the deen, and inshallah make you a means for other people to come to Islam.
So I thank you for the opportunity. Alhamdulillah, hopefully somebody watched the podcast. Well, it might resonate with them. It might be a similar story and might, guide them to Islam or solidify that they made the right decision, right? There's no turning back, really, I mean, a lot of people do, but, yeah, for me, there's no turning back, so.
Inshallah, may Allah keep us all firm.
Ameen.
Just a reminder, subscribe and like down below. Find us on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.